Αναβολικό παράθυρο.
The podcast.
Hello, person who has never seen us or watched the podcast before, because it's usually in Greek. Before we embark on this emotional journey of knowledge, wisdom, and inside jokes in Greek, in English, we would like to briefly introduce ourselves, because this is the first English episode that we're doing for our podcast. A bit of background: we have a podcast called The Anabolic Window, but in Greek, so the Greek equivalent of Anabolic Window, where we discuss all things sports science, gym, strength, hypertrophy, with a sprinkle of inside jokes, vulgar humor, etc. And we decided to launch an English version, an international version of our podcast, as we are all UK residents studying and working in the UK in sport. Excuse me?
Legally,
yes. Yes, this is your lawyer. So just a very brief intro before we dive into the episode. Our podcast is mainly aimed at a Greek audience. All our episodes are in Greek. Thus, if you click on the channel, you'll see that even the title is in Greek. All the other episodes are in Greek, but we aim to rock a few English episodes, a few international episodes, all with guests, academics, scientists, powerlifters, bodybuilders, etc. So these will be available, but just keep in mind that we are mostly catering to our Greek audience. That said, my name is Pak. This is Nick.
and my name is Chris.
I'm currently.
I can talk even though I haven't spoken already.
He is the AI bot of the show, as you'll see and hear. I'm currently finishing my PhD here in Southampton on powerlifting and more specifically the minimum effective training dose for 1 RM strength. I coach athletes, mostly powerlifters and recreationally active individuals who strength train, as well as lift myself. I have previously competed in powerlifting, but I'm not a powerlifter. I just enjoy training. Nick?
I'm coming from a physics background. I'm working with PAC. I'm currently not pursuing a PhD, not as of yet. I'm also, however, training athletes mostly interested in making strength gains, but some hypertrophic gains as well. Not competitive bodybuilders though. I am somewhat of a competitive powerlifter myself, even though I'm not any record man or whatnot. And onward to Christos.
So just one note about Rylafkopoulos, aka Nick. Nick has also helped with a ton of research projects that I've done, and he is a co-author on a couple of papers, and he will also be helping with future research projects that we will be working here.
In due time.
In due course.
Like we don't know. And my name is Chris. The full name is Christos in Greek, but I avoid that as Pak's name, which is Patroklos Androlex Korakakis. Even I said it wrongly. Anyway, yeah, I'm doing my master's in nutrition and exercise sciences, aka sports nutrition, here in Preston, which is a city in the northern part of the UK, at UCLan University. And I'm also planning on getting into research. I'm doing a survey now. Probably Eric will post about it as well. It's on the nutritional knowledge and the dietary habits of powerlifters, bodybuilders, and recreational gym goers. Apart from that, I'm an Olympic weightlifter, not mainly a powerlifter and bodybuilder, mostly recreationally. And yeah, as you'll see as well, I'm a vegan.
Yes. So that's it in terms of context. This is who we are. As I said, most of our episodes are in Greek, but we will have a playlist titled International Series or whatever. All episodes will be in English with Greek subtitles. Our social media is mostly in English, and obviously all the research and a lot of the content that we publish is in English. But yes, that's that. Enjoy the freak show that is the episode and stay hydrated. Wow.
Okay.
As the late DMX said, stop, drop, shut him down, open up shop. Oh no, that's how Rough Riders roll. Which is a completely irrelevant quote for today's episode, but here we are. Ladies and gentlemen, the first international episode of the Anabolic Window, aka Anavoliko Parathero in Greek. I am one of the three hosts, the least attractive and arguably the heavier of the three. My name is Pak Androulakis Korakakis. On my right, I have the AI bot of the show, Nick Michalopoulos Ralefkopoulos. On further right, Mr. Chris Sitas, vegan weightlifter / power builder. And today we are honored to have as our first international guest, the man, the myth, the legend, Dr. Eric Helms.
I thought you'd say Captain America, but
I think it's too overplayed at this point. I wanted to be original, but you decided to ruin it by adding it in the end.
Chris Evans.
Hello,
It's an
Eric.
honor to be here. Thank you guys for having me.
I see that you have some degrees behind you, which I assume will all be replaced now by your official plaque of first international guest.
I also have boxes of stuff we haven't put away, even though we've been in our home for 8 months.
Even more
So-
degrees.
Exactly.
So don't be too impressed by these, which, by the way, half of these are my wife's, but you can't tell in the background, so it looks like I've been in school for at least 2 decades.
I think it's better than our background, which is a flag and 2 barbells.
One devil's bubble,
Labels.
one power.
2 syringes.
It says roids and fields. You know the vibes.
Good.
May I add, is there an IFBB Pro card in the background? If not, why are you keeping all of these?
I mean, can you tell let me ask you this question. Can you tell it's not an IFBB Pro card?
Absolutely not.
Touche.
There you go.
Nice.
I'll let your imagination run with it then.
Just for the record, the flag behind is from a Facebook group where we all met. And when talking about who's nattier or not, you were referenced as the pinnacle of natural bodybuilding and the limit of what can be achieved naturally.
I love the cynicism of people who live in a 2,000-person town with terrible genetics who are experts on steroids, even though they've never actually seen someone use them.
Yes,
It's amazing.
exactly. But they said that you are the limit to what a natural physique can look like, which I guess is both a compliment and an insult. Because
Yes,
on one hand,
absolutely.
With the infamous Frank Zane pose.
Yep.
That's the reference. My citation, that's it. There you
Well,
go.
you know, it's essentially a randomized controlled trial. You have 2 groups, me and Frank Zane, and then you have the loose understanding that he used to have the nickname the chemist, which means he must have been on more gear than Ronnie Coleman. Either that or he taught chemistry in high school. But anyway, and therefore, I am the pinnacle.
yeah, exactly. Plus, you know,
It seems academically robust to me.
there was that study once, FFMI 24, 25, you know, science.
That's right.
Nail
Let's
the
base
coffin.
all of our opinion on one study. Yeah.
Exactly. That's how it goes.
And the study actually disproves the claims that most people make about it.
Yes.
It has the FFMIs of all the pre-steroid Mr. Americas, and like 17 are higher than 25, but that's fine. We're 13 out of something. Yeah.
Yeah. So we're here today to discuss, to have a casual chat, as this is not a very serious podcast, as we already warned you, more like a social experiment of 3 apes trying to make jokes and talk science.
You signed the waiver form. He signed the waiver form.
Yes,
Okay.
he did.
I had to grow a beard. I had to sign the waiver. I did everything I was supposed to do for the podcast. So
Before we start, I apologize, but could you play the intro cassette tape of who you are? Give us a bit of a brief background for some of our listeners that may not be aware of your work.
absolutely. So simply put, I am somebody who absolutely fell in love with lifting weights. Would have been 04 at this point. And with my obsessive personality, it started out as something relatively negative, masochistic, and potentially destructive, but very quickly became a positive thing in my life. And then, like all terrible personal trainers, after I'd been lifting weights for a year, I became a personal trainer and showed people how to do it the right way. and after many years of harming my clients and helping them not get very far, but hate the process, I realized that I was terrible, and I committed towards finding the best way to do things and contributing to the community and trying to give back to the I guess you could say the pursuit that has brought me so much in my life. So in all seriousness, competitive bodybuilding, competitive natural bodybuilding, powerlifting, and just falling in love with the iron game is something that's been an incredibly positive thing in my life. It helped me build my confidence, and it's created a career for me. So fast forward now from 2004 to 2021, I completed my PhD in strength conditioning and my master's with a focus on sports nutrition, looking at protein intake in calorie-restricted strength and physique athletes. And I now am a research fellow at the Sports Performance Research Institute here in New Zealand, where I also did my PhD, where I work with the next generation of scientists in this area, folks who are doing their master's or PhD. That's primarily what I do. Also, back in 2009, 2010, I started 3D Muscle Journey with my colleagues, Alberto Nunez, Brad Loomis, and Jeff Alberts. And eventually we brought on Andrea Valdez and our specialists, Amanda Rizzo, Nick Licamelli, and Steve Taylor, where we are trying to improve the sustainability of lifting careers of folks. So essentially finding better ways to do things, which includes evidence-based practice, but also healthier long-term perspectives on how to do this whole weight training thing. Not just improving performance today, but giving people the ability to compete or not compete, but lift on their own terms for decades rather than burning out, which is unfortunately too common. So anywho, on that evidence-based side of things, because I'm the resident nerd, I'm the chief science officer of 3D Muscle Journey, so it's my job to keep us up to date. And I have done a lot of things in that area. So I'm part of MASS, Monthly Applications in Strength Sport, with the two chief nerds over at Stronger by Science, Greg Knuckles and Eric Trexler, and also my friend and colleague, Dr. Mike Zerdos. And I got some books. I do some consulting. I still lift weights and compete myself. I've shown that if you want to be mediocre at both physique sport and multiple strength sports, that with enough hard work, you can achieve that goal. So I'm a living example of that mediocrity. And somehow also, like we talked about earlier, achieving the peak potential of natural performance.
Let's go.
All I heard, I don't know if I'm understanding English really well, but you did some useless degrees and you're a natural bodybuilder. That's what counts. That's what we got from all that, right?
Correct. Yes, 100%.
I have an important question, though. Excuse me for interrupting you guys. Eric, have you ever had the chance of training properly one of those clients that you get to screw up in the past? Have you ever had the opportunity to make amends with them?
I honestly, I have actually, I have a relationship with some of my earliest clients. So some of the folks who I was a one-on-one trainer with, and, I was obviously not as good as when I started versus I am now, or I'm doing something wrong. But at the same time, I probably wasn't as terrible as I was joking to be. But there were a lot of things that I wish I had done differently. Getting people a little more interested in the process. And it took me a few years before I realized that not everyone wanted to be a bodybuilder or a powerlifter, and that there are other ways to do physical activity. But I will say that
Olympic weightlifting.
Correct. That's the other, or stones. Tire flipping.
Of course.
But I have kept in touch with them, and I think I would like to say the fact that they are still in touch with me means that I wasn't too terrible. So
when you started asking the question, I was just expecting some joke to come up, and I was like, you completely mugged me with that answer, and I appreciate that.
I should have just said, I'm sorry, but the lawsuits are still underway. I've been advised not to talk about them.
We're in charge of the subtitles here. So you mentioned that you achieved mediocre results in both powerlifting and bodybuilding, but because Greeks sometimes tend to operate in a they really like status, or you gotta tell them, oh, we got Eric Helms, Dr. Eric Helms, the pro bodybuilder. I'm gonna the subtitles will say IFBB Pro, 6 times Mr. Olympia, and 3 times world record holder. Absolutely.
6 times Mr. Olympia. Yeah, I mean, So if people care, I have gotten a pro card in a small natural bodybuilding organization, the INBA. So I got that in 2011. Since then, I've actually been trying to get my WNBF pro card, which is arguably the largest and I would say the most professional of the, no offense to any other natural bodybuilding organizations, but of those that are out there, big fan of the INBF, WNBF. I had to run at that in 2019, got close, but did not get it. So that is one of the lifetime goals for me, is to try to become a WNBF pro and then earn the right to get my ass handed to me in the pro division at Worlds. So that's where I want to go, but not there yet. But hey,
Nice.
just got to give you enough secret sauce in the off season, and cut it off just in time to pass the drug test, as they say on the internet.
Exactly.
Like we don't know.
Like we don't. Yes, of course, Mr. Helms, Dr. Helms. So
Thank you. I like how, in accusing me of being a fake natty, you corrected it to Dr. Helms. That's this very interesting mix of respect and derision.
we have a bunch of characters based on real people, and that's one of the voices. That's there. You're a fake natty voice.
It's a good voice.
That's based on a close.
On one of the guests of the.
On one of the first guests of the podcast and legendary person. Anyways,
I think it's a very kind interpretation of the average voice of those people, because it assumes they've actually gone through puberty, and I don't know how accurate that is most of the time, but fair enough.
fair enough.
He's been enough juice to go through puberty 3 times.
3 times, yeah.
Fair call.
Nice. So the situation in Greece at the moment, obviously not the economy and the situation in general, but the situation when it comes to the fitness world, and it's a world that we've penetrated quite recently as a team, because I've been UK based for the last 8 years, and before that I was in Germany. Chris and Nick left a few years ago, but they were part of the scene, but not an integral part of the Greek scene there. But anyways, the scene there is still kind of split in camps. So we have the powerlifters, and then we have the bodybuilders. And the bodybuilders tend to be, there are some natural bodybuilders that are coming up, and they are, paving the way with evidence-based approach to training, and, tracking training and treating performances as an important metric to improve their physiques, etc. But the majority of bodybuilders are still off the old school, some of them enhanced, some of them not, but a lot of bro science, a lot of buy the supplement, get the supplement, don't train like a power lifter, half reps, rack pulls, etc. And on the other hand, we have a lot of new powerlifters, as powerlifter started growing in Greece, I think, from 2014 onwards.
Yeah, more or less.
The first comps were back then. But there is, as I said, a camp mentality. So it's either you're a powerlifter or you're a bodybuilder. And we thought that it would be interesting to bring you here, and because you have experience in both sports, and of course you also have a lot of experience working with clients in both bodybuilding and powerlifting, and to discuss what can a bodybuilder learn from a powerlifter, and what can a powerlifter learn from a bodybuilder? Essentially, should a bodybuilder powerlift, and why? And should a powerlifter bodybuild, and why?
No, it's a very good topic.
Yeah, and we wanted to start. I mean, we noted down. We wanted to hear your personal experience with both sports, but you covered us there. Our backgrounds, just for the sake of the episode, because there's going to be a few listeners that haven't heard the other episodes because they're in Greek. My background is in general strength training, but I've competed in powerlifting in the past. Nick has competed in powerlifting and is training for powerlifting. Chris is the versatile athlete. For one, he's vegan, but he's competed in weightlifting.
We gotta say, this is the first thing you say. I'm vegan, and then you say the rest.
We actually have him here just for that card. No. We like vegans. Chris is vegan.
You still got your vegan powers. You haven't lost them. No slip ups.
No, he's killing it. But in Greece, veganism is not such a huge thing. So he always gets the. Can you eat eggs? Is milk allowed? Anyway, so we wanted to start by asking, should a bodybuilder power lift, and why? And kind of start a discussion based on that, and share our views, hear your views, and
for sure. Yeah, so I came into the scene at a pretty cool time where there was starting to be a merging of kind of the, I would say, at least on the drug free side, there was a little more merging of bodybuilding and powerlifting at the same time. not too many years after I started, the Raw division exploded. USAPL jumped on that, which is an IPF affiliate. And at the same time, like Lane Norton, as an example, was a pretty well-known person on the internet as someone who was promoting an evidence-based approach, also as a natural bodybuilder, and then competed as a power lifter. So I think the initial skepticism that people have isn't based on logic per se, but it's based on, is the proof in the pudding? Have I seen someone who can be reasonably successful at both? So I think I was fortunate in that I saw that. And, my first competition in 2006 was actually a push-pull meet, an unsanctioned one just at my local gym. Since then, I have done right around 20 powerlifting meets over the years. I've done, I think, 13 bodybuilding shows. And I've done a handful of Olympic weightlifting meets and a couple of strongman-esque events as well. And one Highland Games competition that I don't want to disrespect. I'm not going to call myself a Highland Games competitor if you saw the performance, but I was there and I did it. So I certainly, yes, I'm the best Highland Games competitor in the world, is what I'm saying.
Has anyone else from New Zealand been in Highland Games?
There are actually some pretty damn good Highland Games competitors in New Zealand. So
Americans in New Zealand? Exactly.
Yeah, I mean, it is possible that I'm one of the top 5
You have it.
Americans in New Zealand.
He's the only one.
There's probably somebody else. So I'm confident in the top 5. So I appreciate that. If you just put enough constraints on me, then I can be the best in the world. Now the reason why I really enjoy competing in multiple strength sports and physique sports is because of the challenge of finding a way to program for them all. So I guess the simple answer to your question, Pac, is a bodybuilder doesn't have to or wouldn't necessarily benefit from powerlifting, but they certainly can, and it won't be an impediment to their progress. And I think it is one of the easiest, two of the easiest sports to marry together is bodybuilding and powerlifting. So, if you look at research on powerlifters, you see that their performance, a high degree of the variance is explained by how much muscle size they have at a high level. And of course, there's academic debate to what degree muscle mass contributes to strength in terms of like a causational nature over time from resistance training. But it's kind of hard to deny the cross-sectional data that suggests when you look at high-level powerlifters, the bigger ones tend to be stronger. And accruing more contractile tissue mass probably is going to help you contract harder and produce more force. I don't think that's an unreasonable statement. So then we have to ask, what stimulates hypertrophy? Essentially, it's progressive overload. So while even if you don't want to be a powerlifter who is a bodybuilder or vice versa, if you're interested in accruing muscle mass, it's not necessary to test your 1RM squat, but you absolutely need to be making sure that your performance is going up over time to confirm that progressive overload occurred. So some of the things that we've encouraged at 3D Muscle Journey in our pure physique athletes, although we work with powerlifters, bodybuilders, and dual sport athletes, is that we need to be observing performance. So yes, the pump is good, fantastic. Yes, you want to make sure you have a good mind-muscle connection. Yes, you want to be using various exercises, not just like the big 3 other compounds. But on whatever movements you are tracking, if you are able to do the same load for the same reps at the same level of effort 5 years from now, that muscle group probably hasn't grown very much if you're a natural bodybuilder. And that's been an observation that I've seen I think I figured it out one time. I've helped over 300 people to the stage and probably half that number to the platform. So, when I do look at my powerlifters to get stronger, they tend to move up in weight classes over time, especially early in their career. Also, recently in mass, Greg Nuckols reviewed a paper that asked the question, how much does hypertrophy contribute to strength? And a cool little analysis he did was he looked at trying to explain the variance in strength increases. And the largest correlation and the most explanatory variable was body weight going up.
Which paper was that? Was that on sports medicine that came out?
Correct. Greg reviewed the paper out of Lenneke's lab that looked at, and he basically stated, this is a very cool paper, very well done, and I have a lot of respect for Dr. Lenneke and the work he does. I think he's asking important fundamental questions. At the same time, if you have a short time period looking at a small muscle group and there's only small changes in strength and hypertrophy, it's very difficult to definitively answer what the role is. So it was interesting. Greg said, hey, let's take a look at powerlifters. What happens to the people who are getting stronger over time? What is a commonality between them? So this isn't, of course, like an RCT, but the only strongest predictor really was going up in body weight. And that explained a fair amount of the variance of getting stronger. So this is something powerlifters know. Going up in weight classes, you tend to get stronger. That's why they have weight classes in the first place. So my point is,
not in the jungle though. Just so
the jungle's different. In the jungle, weight classes don't matter.
How do we know
that
they don't have weight class in the jungle? I mean, we haven't really managed to communicate with animals at that level.
Not having held a competition.
For all we know, they could have.
Well, so we have some observations which help with this. So, for example, you will see what would probably be a higher weight class predator eating a lower weight class prey. And you would think if they were respecting weight classes, they would only be going after similar weight matched.
Fair enough.
And I've never seen them cut weight. Not intentionally. You don't see a whole lot of spitting. I haven't yet to find a sauna in the jungle.
Like we don't
know. Yeah, exactly.
I mean,
I'm going to make a case of the lower prey weighing on the lower end of the weight class. So maybe they screwed up their weight cut and they missed that 1 kilo and they had to sign up for the upper weight class.
This is class. Classic anabolic window joke.
So we're actually viewing the penalization of not making weight is that you get eaten. So maybe we're just looking at the enforcement side. Maybe they're doing a better job than the IPF at enforcing their rules. IPF, take note and check out the Jungle Powerlifting Federation. So, yeah. So getting back to your question, powerlifters and bodybuilders, you certainly don't have to train like one another. But bodybuilders, it would be very intelligent of you to make sure that you are getting stronger over time, which doesn't mean you're 1RM, but seeing an improvement in performance objectively on the movements you care about. Likewise, powerlifters, it would be intelligent, especially if you're earlier in your career and you're not very close to your quote-unquote muscular potential, to make sure that you are actually gaining weight alongside your resistance training, because that will probably contribute to your performance over time.
So I think this is a great pass, and I really wanted to discuss this with you because I've seen this as a trend in not only natural bodybuilding, but a certain side of bodybuilding as a whole, which natural bodybuilders adhere to, but also enhanced bodybuilders adhere to. The idea that getting stronger equals muscle mass, but to the extent where we are prioritizing, or they are prioritizing, certain compound movements. And trying to get, they doing 3 or 4 or 5 RM sets, relatively low volume, sometimes with sloppy form because they are chasing load. So that's used a bit as a tagline. So chase load, because that will translate into thickness or density, whatever else that means. Which I think, and sometimes they tend to say that, look at the biggest bodybuilders, they tend to be the strongest. But my thought there was that, why are they the strongest? Do you think they're the biggest because they're the strongest, or are they the strongest because they're the biggest? And yeah, the whole idea of chasing load, I totally agree with you. You have to track performance, and as a bodybuilder, natural or not, you must see that performance increase over time. But did that 3RM YOLO set of deadlifts, touch and go, really add that much density to your erectors, or was it a bit more of a placebo effect?
I think it's honestly just it's not completely reverse causality, because obviously training with heavier loads does cause a greater level of tension, but it can't be divorced from things like frequency and volume. But I think a better conceptualization is that your ability to do more reps, lift more load, or perform the same load and same reps at a lower level of effort is indicative that whatever training you've been doing is a sufficient stimulus to result in these muscular gains. Mm-hmm. And they could be purely neuromuscular and skill-oriented if, for example, you're new to a certain movement. But if we're talking about well-trained bodybuilders and well-trained strength athletes, in a vacuum, I don't think it's unreasonable to suggest that, okay, if you have established a lot of the fundamentals of the movement pattern, you've made a lot of the core neuromuscular gains, that the progress over time is probably indicative that there is enough of a hypertrophy stimulus or some other type of mechanical or morphological adaptation happening. And I would say that the limited data we have, the correlational data, would suggest that. We typically see rapid strength gains early on when someone starts lifting weights, and then it takes a certain amount of time for us to observe the changes in hypertrophy, which doesn't mean they're not happening. It just means we don't have sufficient measurement precision. Yeah. And then the strength gains slow down. And you typically see stronger relationships between strength and hypertrophy when you look at more trained individuals, when you look at observational correlations, than you do with lesser trained individuals. And it makes sense. We know a lot of different things contribute to strength. And if you hold a lot of them fixed, one of the potential contributors being hypertrophy, yes, it is probably the fact that you're getting bigger, which allows you to be stronger. So I don't think it makes sense to say that lifting heavier weights necessarily is causing increases in muscle mass. Only if you're doing a sufficient amount of volume and a sufficient frequency, and the overall training dose is there. Your ability to lift heavier weights is probably because, like you said, Pac, you got more muscle to move it, more contractile tissue.
And usually, sorry, Chris.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Should I continue because I want to ask you something else on
completely unrelated.
No, it's related.
I was going to say that the not annoying thing, but the other thing that some of these people don't always mention, or at least don't pay attention to, is that yes, you did do that compound exercise, whether that be RDLs or conventional deadlifts or whatever, and you are crediting that exercise for your back thickness, glute thickness, whatever, but you also did another 25 exercises for those muscle groups, which you did for higher reps, a lot of volume, slower, more controlled movements. And I think that sort of train of thought has pushed a lot of new bodybuilders towards a path of inefficiency. If
I would
that
agree.
Makes sense. Like if you have a limited amount of energy to spend in the gym, you'd much rather spend it for those 2 extra sets on a controlled whatever exercise that may be, rather than that YOLO max out 3 to 5 RM. Nice.
Yeah. I think if I may, and I know there was another question, but I think some of the research that's come out, I think the one most people are most familiar with is Dr. Schoenfeld's PhD dissertation work, which showed like 7 sets of 2 to 4 RM produced a similar hypertrophy stimulus to 3x10 or 3x8 to 12, if I recall correctly, over time. And this was kind of categorized as powerlifting style training versus bodybuilding style training. And there was no significant difference in the tonnage or the volume load done between groups. So they said, hey, this is evidence that it is more about volume necessarily than load. But hey, both groups grew similarly, but the group lifting heavier got stronger. And this kind of started what I would call like the modern power building style of going, all right, I'm just going to do more sets of 3 to 5 because then I can get the benefits of both worlds. And I think this is probably overall an inefficient approach to getting bigger because each one of those sets is far more. I mean, it's similar stimulus, and you do get greater strength gains. However, the cost is with much heavier stress or much heavier loads and higher stress per unit of volume. And if you look at some of the data out there, you see higher injury rates in strength athletes than bodybuilders. Subjectively, reports of being more stressed trying to lift heavier. So I don't necessarily think that someone who's interested in being strong and big should just do all the volume of heavy lifting. I think there are more efficient pathways.
I mean, they were given a questionnaire after the finish of the training study, those participants, and they commented on, they got a score on how difficult, how beat up they were after the end of the session. And I remember the score for those guys that trained with 7 sets or so was much higher than those that trained 3x10.
Nice.
Yeah, I can't remember if it was actually
lasted a lot more than those.
Yep. Yes. Yeah, I don't remember if they actually quantified how hard it was, but I do remember in the discussion, and I've talked to Brad about this, that the individuals who are doing the 3x8 to 12 felt like they could have done a lot more. They had fewer dropouts, and the folks who were doing the 7x3 felt like they were getting crushed. Barely made it through this study. And like you said, it took I think 3 times or 4 times as long to do the 7x3.
Yeah.
So absolutely, from an efficiency standpoint, there's a little more to view than just like the mean results when you compare it, for sure.
I mean, someone wasn't trying hard if they felt way too fresh after the workout, but yeah, that's just my opinion.
If you don't give it 120%,
Exactly.
are you really working on?
If it's war,
Then it's war. And yeah, sorry, Chris, we've prolonged your question.
I just wanted to ask a question on the notion of the basic lifts, squat, bench, deadlift, overhead press. Did I forget something?
Barbell row.
Bentley row, yeah.
And bicep curls.
Calf raise.
Would you say that for a bodybuilder who wouldn't want to train the power lifts, would you say that they're essential in any sense? And given the fact that they produce more, they can produce, I think, at least in myself, and I see it in clients and friends of mine who lift, more fatigue. Would you say that it might be a bit more wise to not focus so much on the power lifts for a bodybuilder?
Yeah, I think
vice versa for a powerlifter to focus too much on hypertrophy?
Yeah, I tend to stay away from the terminology main lifts. I think that's kind of that's like a powerlifter bias.
Yeah.
Like Dr. Zerdos, I always call him out for that. He's like, the main lifts, and I'm like, for who? You know what? Not everyone thinks the squat, bench, and deadlift are the main lifts.
So much respect to your supervisor.
I tell you what, him and I were at each other's throats all the time.
Fellow Greek as well, eh?
Yeah,
he is, which makes sense when you think about his personality and why he's so abrasive. You like that? Just shots fired at all three for no reason.
At all 11 million of us.
Yeah. Get him, he's in New Zealand.
That's from clickbait.
Yep,
title.
that's right. I'm on the other side of the planet. What are you going to do? Our borders are closed.
New Zealand.
He's in New Zealand.
Okay.
Greek mafia is coming to me. All right. So yeah, but in all seriousness, I think the way I conceptualize main lifts for physique athletes is I actually have like 6. And that is a vertical push and pull for the upper body, a horizontal push and pull for the upper body, a hinge, and a squat. And I'm very liberal when it comes to what meets that terminology. So when I say a squat, that could be a hack squat, that could be a leg press, that could be a front squat, that could be a safety bar squat. Anything where there's simultaneous hip and knee extension through a relatively full range of motion, I'm good with it. And the hinge, RDL, good morning, deadlift, God forbid even a hip thrust, kind of the same kind of liberalness, because ultimately movements shouldn't be on a pedestal just because of their reputation.
Yes.
Movements should be evaluated for what do they do for you. Yes. So I do agree that the quote unquote main lifts are very efficient from a standpoint of training a lot of muscles at the same time. But for the same reason that they train a lot of muscles at the same time, like you said, they induce a lot of fatigue. So while it makes a lot of sense for a powerlifter who competes in these movements to keep them in some fashion all the time, for a physique athlete, I think you probably want to have some of these free weight compound barbell or dumbbell based movements in for the simple reason that the body is very complex and we have muscles to move. And and the term isolation, I think, is very misleading. A lot of the times bodybuilders have these conceptions of this movement is for back, this movement is for this. But when it really comes to the true functional anatomy, we forget that, the bicep is a weak shoulder flexor. One head of the triceps is a weak shoulder extensor. The deepest portion of a squat, your adductor, is actually the strongest hip extensor. So the complexities of human movement go beyond the categories that we put some of these movements in. So it probably makes sense to try to not outsmart the body and have a core group of these compound movements with those liberal assignments that I mentioned as a part of your programming as a bodybuilder, and then fill things in with isolation movements and have a fair amount of machine stuff and lower fatigue, higher specific stimulus exercises that are matched to your biomechanics, equipment availability, injury history, and personal preferences. So while I might have a hypertrophy phase for a power lifter, have some heavy squats and then a fair amount of close variations to the squat that I think will have maximal transfer, a bodybuilder might have a couple of squats, some leg press, some leg extensions, and a similar kind of split. So you see I typically like to have a more even proportion between what might be considered main lifts and accessories, because ultimately they're all serving the same purpose for a physique athlete. It's hard to make an argument that a squat is a better movement if I just look at the quads than a leg extension. Might be more helpful for like overall leg development, but we got to grow it all if we want to be successful in physique sport.
As Tom Platz once said, quads are the prime mover. Use your legs when squatting. I think that's one of the most successful squat cues of all time.
5 more.
5 more.
Get back.
1, 2. But yeah, I'm really glad you shared that, just so we can just send the video to people, timestamp it, and just be like, oh, here you go. Another person saying it, not just us. Because we've been, like, internally as a group, we tend to go on walks and talk a lot about everything, muscle building and muscle strength. And, like, we grew up reading a lot about the main lifts and pack on size and thick back and builds this and builds that. And
back in the day, there was even hormonal responses.
Yeah, the classic.
Yeah.
And when we got involved in the sports science side of things, and we started, doing research ourselves and doing our degrees. I mean, Nick has a physics background, Chris has a nutrition background, and I did the same bachelor's, a similar bachelor's to you, and then research, and then the PhD. Once we looked behind the curtain and started looking at the literature, we were like, wait a second, there's not much to support many of those claims. Like, why is the deadlift the absolute king of all exercises? I mean, I can understand from a point of, you're average Joe who wants to get strong and big for health and, just look brawny. I get that. It's an efficient exercise. You're using a lot of muscle groups, et cetera, et cetera. But, a lot of those claims that were not backed by almost any evidence, at least, they were backed.
Or they're backed by questions that make no sense in real life. Like, how little kids like, who would win if a gorilla fought Godzilla, but the gorilla was on steroids and 5 feet tall? Like, that's the equivalent question to if you just had, exactly, it would be the gorilla. That's the correct answer. That's the equivalent question to what's the best exercise if you could only do one? Yeah. And people would be like, the deadlift. Therefore, the deadlift's the best. But you don't have to do one.
Yeah.
No one does one. Why would you do one? Yeah. I don't understand these propositions.
It's like doing all those mental gymnastics, but then extrapolating the answer to the real world. Whereas you got so many constricts to actually form the question.
Yeah, it's no longer ecologically valid.
Yeah,
exactly. And we've been discussing that with fellow bodybuilders as well, and the notion that you need to do a heavy deadlift as a bodybuilder. And it's a preference thing. If you want to do a heavy deadlift because you love heavy deadlifts, I like heavy deadlifts, and I don't necessarily care to maximize muscle growth in all areas except my chest, as you can see. But for somebody to say, oh, you need to do it because, hey, look at this pro bodybuilder with elite genetics on a lot of juice who also did some deadlifts at some point, but another 6,000 exercise for back, he did them, so we should do it. I think that's ridiculous.
Well, all I've seen is Ronnie Coleman pulling 800 pounds, so...
I'm not going to comment on Ronnie Coleman. Go on, Chris.
No, I just wanted to move to the next topic.
Yes.
Which would be how, like we discussed about bodybuilding, powerlifting. I'd ask you, how are you combining those two? Like, do you use any type of periodization?
And would you combine them? Yeah. Or in which case would you combine them? Because I think that's also important.
That's a great question. And I think I want to start off with actually saying thank you, PAC, because your research has actually heavily influenced how I think about periodizing these over the years. And it has changed my training. I'll be honest, I would say your research, more than any other research I can think of in the last 5 years, has changed the way I train directly.
It was so bad that it motivated me to train harder than ever to find you.
Yeah, so exactly. So actually, full disclosure, I hadn't been training for 6 years, and then I met you, and you inspired me to actually start lifting weights again. So
that would make a great movie or a series.
Yeah, that's totally false. But no, but in all seriousness, your work that looked at the minimum dose in training lifters, the systematic review you did, as well as the pilot study with Greek powerlifters, I think it really solidified for me something I'd observed and I experienced when I came back from surgery, just how powerful a specific dose can be. a single at a 7 to 10 RPE on the main lifts can do probably is enough, even sometimes in trained lifters, to move the needle forward, or at least to maintain strength. And the amount of stress you get out of that is a lot less than like a 5x5, which is you're kind of like train for strength, got to do that, kind of thing. So when you have multiple lifts that you're trying to get better at, I have now started to think about, all right, well, there is training the skill, which is probably, I normally I'll start over. I have a periodization style where I keep in the singles on any lifts that I want to maintain or gain strength on. And the frequency and the RPE goes up based on how close I am to needing to actually perform. So for example, if I am in a pure bodybuilding phase, far from a strength competition, but I still want to be able to be strong and shift and, say, all right, now in 12 weeks, I'm going to do a powerlifting meet. I might just do a single at a 5 to 7 RPE once a week on the big three, which would literally take me a total of 15 minutes a week. And it's very easy to transpose that on top of a program that is hypertrophy specific to my needs as a bodybuilder. Likewise, I can emphasize it differently. When I am, let's say starting a meet prep, I will have a fair amount of hypertrophy work, and it will start to drop away as I add more specific work on the main lifts. And this has been observed many times in the periodization research. The strength work is enough to maintain hypertrophy, just even though it's not like sufficient to necessarily make a trained lifter grow. So it's essentially, the way I think of it, like a stove. I'm moving things onto low heat on the back burner as a maintenance dose, and then I'm emphasizing something else. So instead of these highly contrasting styles of training, which I might have used to do before I really thought about this and was influenced by your work pack, where it's like, all right, strength training or bodybuilding, or combining them and having that higher stress level that isn't ideal that we talked about earlier, to where you're kind of redlining it all the time. I'm not having to take a large amount of time and lose something to regain it, and I'm also not just inducing too much stress into the whole systems that I'm being suboptimal. Now I can, at the worst case, it's just the opportunity cost. Now this isn't time where I can train perfectly for both, which I think ends up being a better proposition when you look at it long term, in terms of how much you can gain in both. And I think it becomes a more favorable proposition the more experienced you get, where you have more of your kind of foundational muscle mass built. You don't require you're only going to get so much for each investment. And that allows you to focus on something and just focus on maintenance on the other. So that's kind of how I do it as someone who is a physique and strength athlete. To go back to your question of when should someone do it, or should someone do it at all? I think it's totally dependent on your goals. I don't want people to get the impression that you need to powerlift to be a successful bodybuilder, or that a successful powerlifter needs to go through phases of bodybuilding. I think a more accurate statement is that a successful powerlifter needs to think about, how do I get bigger? And a successful bodybuilder needs to track progress and ensure they are progressing to keep making gains. However, if you are someone who likes just lifting and being strong, it's a viable pathway. And for me, I've always equally loved the process of trying to get bigger and mold my physique and that artistic component to it, as well as the thrill of just trying to put up a new 1 rep max. So that's why I've been a dual sport athlete since I started, because I just love both. And the question of whether or not it would be more efficient from a performance standpoint to just be one or the other is irrelevant to me, because that's not my goal. Yeah. My goal is to be a multi-sport strength athlete, physique athlete. So I think that's the main thing I want to get across to people is no one needs to do both, but there are potential benefits. And I think back in the day when we started 3D Muscle Journey, we saw a consistent issue with people with competitive bodybuilders in the off season struggling. Especially in the natural bodybuilding scene, where progress is slower. It's not as easy to tell that you're progressing. And when you focus on your physique in the off season, you just feel bad about yourself. So like if the new standard of what looks good is me on stage, for a natural bodybuilder, you just kind of look worse progressively throughout the off season. Even if you're doing it well, like if you're putting on muscle, because you have to be so incredibly lean these days. So shifting the focus from your physique to your performance in the gym is a very useful mental strategy. But you can do that without getting on a platform. You can do that by just focusing on like your hammer strength chest press and your rows and that going up, and the process and those quantitative elements of performance without necessarily going like, do I look better today? Oh no, I'm still fat. You know, that's
My life.
a better mental way of doing it. It's honestly, it's the way most bodybuilders feel in the off season. If they keep that mentality and that focus, which I don't think is helpful.
26-year-old off season right here.
Killing it.
We're still building.
May I add a follow-up question to that, but more focused on because you've actually competed many times in those two sports and fairly recently.
Congrats on the PR as well,
Yeah.
on the deadlift PR 260.
Thank you.
I was expecting.
I was pretty happy.
So he could flex his numbers, but apparently he didn't. So when it comes to,
Do I need to flex my numbers? Is that what I need to do now? Just
absolutely,
The Greeks.
You should.
No offense to Greeks.
all right. So my best competition squat is 222 kilos. Best in the gym squat's 225. My best bench is touch and go 165. In competition is 150. My best deadlift is 260 in competition because I haven't done 260 in the gym. It's just one of those good days.
Edit that. And this
At a body weight at a body weight of 59 kilos, by the way.
400 kilo deadlift.
505. Yeah.
Vlad all over again. The funny thing was, I was looking at an interview of Vlad, Vlad Alhazov. I'm not sure how to pronounce his name.
525 squat.
525 squat in reps. And I was like, let me see what the guy says about training. And the question was like, how do you train? He's like, I do heavy squats, and sometimes I eat more rice, and sometimes I eat less rice. And I was like, nice.
On some days when I feel stronger, I put on more weight.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, anyways, go on.
Doesn't have to be complicated.
RP-based training, basically.
Huh?
RP-based training.
Yes, exactly. Auto-regulated.
Absolutely. So, when it comes to actually, I mean, you obviously mentioned how can someone train for both, but for both strength and size. But when it comes to actually competing, do you feel that because an athlete has to, or a lifter has to essentially peak in one of the sports that they decide they need to compete, do you feel that it takes the other sport takes a hit on, and that could possibly influence how many times per year or how often could you compete in either of those when you want to switch, actually, when you want, for example, to be better stated, when a powerlifter wants to switch and compete in bodybuilding and then again onto powerlifting, does that influence how many times does he need to,
Like a machine gun.
Yeah.
It's one huge sentence.
that's me 3 months ago.
Question.
100%. It does. It does. It does. So
It'd be nice if you said no.
no, it doesn't. Next question. Yeah. It's totally fine. Compete as many times as you want, both. So Berto, back in, it would have been 2014 or 2013, I can't remember which. He did a bodybuilding show within 5 days of USAPL Nationals, and he had a terrible meet. And he was like, I wouldn't do that again. I'm glad I did it. It was really cool, but I wouldn't do it again. So I specifically when it comes to peaking, when you do have to do the acute maximization of performance and dumping of fatigue, it makes it very difficult to be for both. Fortunately, or to train for both efficiently. Fortunately, this should be a relatively short time period. But like you said, it is a time period, and it does have to follow an actual peak building before you then taper for strength sport. So it does mean you should probably build backwards from your competition schedule. So instead of just going, sweet, I have a plan to train for both, and I'll just do shows and powerlifting meets kind of willy-nilly, you sort of have to think about what year do I want to focus on one sport more than the other? Or if I have a year where I focus on multiple ones, I need to be very selective about where they're placed. So I'll explain by way of personal experience. In 2020, I had the goal of competing in a strongman competition, an Olympic weightlifting meet, and a powerlifting meet in the same year and not get hurt, with not get hurt being the primary goal. The good news is I did not get hurt, so mission accomplished. The bad news was, I don't know if you guys have heard about this COVID thing. That's something you're familiar with?
Of course, yes, this is because Samaras COVID expert immunologist. Yes, we haven't heard those story tales, Dr. Friends. Yes.
I feel like I just stumbled into a joke I know nothing about. I love it.
The same character is also a COVID denier.
Yeah.
Well, not COVID denier.
Of course he is.
COVID expert. Shout out to our good friend.
Yeah.
Same thing. Denier expert. So anyway, so COVID happened, and while we were mostly unscathed here in New Zealand, we did have a couple of lockdowns, a very long one early in the year, and then I think seven weeks. It was 8 weeks for me because I just traveled, and then we had another 3-weeker back in August. So the Strongman show got canceled. The powerlifting meets got pushed back to the end of the year. So I had this plan where I was going to do, strongman competition early, get that out of the way, shift to Olympic weightlifting, and then finish with powerlifting. And I looked at the competition schedule and I built it all based around, what I thought would be reasonable and what I had to focus on and what would transfer best to the next. And I had all perfectly planned out, and then it got exploded. But the point being is that was an intentional process. If you do have a year where you want to compete in multiple sports, you have to think about the timing a lot. So for example, back in 2009, I did a powerlifting meet on the way down during a cut for a bodybuilding season. So I walk around right now around 95 kilos. So I competed in a 90 kilo weight class about 2 months into my prep. So I dropped some weight, and my strength was actually better by coefficient. However, in 2011, I did a meet at the bottom of my weight class, and my coefficient was the same because I had lost so much strength that even when I'd gotten down to, I was 83, I competed 82.5, which is basically my stage weight, or right around there. And my performance was as if I was in a 93 kilo class because I had lost so much strength that I was effectively the same. I guess that's fine, right? I didn't lose any strength technically, but if you do it right, you can plan it where before you start to get a lot of prep fatigue, you can actually be stronger because you've dropped a fair amount of body fat and retained muscle and strength. So that's the type of kind of thinking you need to have, and it does limit which you focus on. And what I've found in recent times is now I might do a meet during a bodybuilding prep or something like that, but I don't try to have a full mixed season. And if I do, I really have to think about it because it's probably too much. So for example, I think about where I'm going to compete far in advance. So when I decided I wanted to do a 2019 bodybuilding season, I spent most of 2018 training for bodybuilding with just a sufficient amount to not lose strength in my main lifts. And then all of 2019 was minimal strength work and mostly focused on bodybuilding. And then I've now been focusing on strength sport again and still trying to do enough to grow. And I'm planning to compete in 2023 in bodybuilding. And so the end of this year and into 2022 will again be that more hypertrophy oriented focus. So I think there should be these you need to I think if you want to do this for a while, it changes the nature of the game. You're not in a rush to try to be a dual sport athlete all the time, all the same. I think of having years that are focused more on one or the other. And the time where I did decide to do all three, that was a specific challenging goal for that year that I thought was motivating, but it certainly wasn't my norm.
I actually like this approach, being less stressed and more, looking at the big picture and how you can compete in both sports, but not really, setting a goal that's 6 months, 12 months ahead of, and just, down the line competing on both. I actually like that.
Long-term phasic approaches, the periodization kind of emerges out of what are you going to focus on this year, what are you going to focus on next year, versus I got to do it all.
Just before Chris says anything, we are running out of time, except if you have more time. I'm just going based on the calendar invite. I'm not sure if you have another 5-10 minutes.
I got more than that. As much as you guys want to stay up.
All right, let's do this. Okay,
6 hours.
Bring out the COVID graphs. Okay, let's see. So you see the line here? Look at the other line. They got us. Okay, yeah, Chris, go.
Just wanted to ask you, do you think, from a personal experience, I feel like, because I'm trying to combine Olympic weightlifting, which is more recreationally nowadays, it's only once per week, but mostly power building. So yeah, the term that we use powerlifting and bodybuilding together, although I don't have any goals of competing. And I think most of our viewers actually don't compete or don't have any plans of competing in
all three.
At least bodybuilding. I think the mostly powerlifting focus. Anyway, would you say that
I do, yeah. I mean, because if we step it down from talking about competition, like if you're not worried about how proportionate your calves are, and if you don't care necessarily that perhaps your rear delts aren't as developed as you'd like and things like that.
That's the muscle group I always say. I say rear delts and sometimes calves.
then I think you'll actually see some incredible physiques in powerlifting, especially when you look at some of the smaller weight classes where the competitors stay a little bit leaner, like Ashton Rushka, Taylor Atwood, Jessica Bittner. I can think of a bunch of lifters who primarily train for powerlifting. Some of them do a fair amount of both, like Russell Orhey or something like that. But just your average powerlifter, when they're reasonably lean, who is been training for a while and has gained some strength and has gone up a weight class or two, has a pretty solid physique that most people would attribute to a bodybuilder. And I think that's because between the squat, the bench, and the deadlift and the typical variations and going through phases of volume, it's hard not to build a muscular physique. Would they, if they decided to switch and compete in bodybuilding, change up their training? Should they? Probably, because there's more efficient ways to get there without having as high of an injury occurrence. And like those muscle groups I mentioned, like, the short head of the biceps femoris, calves, rear delts, your lats, and things like that are just not going to be quite as well developed if you don't do a little more direct work on them, if it's all indirect. So I think powerlifting and bodybuilding are two of the easier ones to marry up. You mentioned you're doing some Olympic weightlifting. I actually think Olympic weightlifting and bodybuilding is harder to marry up because you just don't have as much time producing tension over long periods. You produce a lot of tension, high force, and then you're moving explosively, and then you're catching. So there's no eccentric component. Sometimes the lifts are so challenging, you never do more than sets of 3. And it's just the time cost is so much that growing from clean and jerks is pretty hard because you have to actually be strong enough to get a sufficient stimulus. They're not, the main lifts in Olympic lifting aren't great for building size, while the main lifts in powerlifting, even when you're training for strength, are pretty good vehicles comparatively. Not as good as doing sets of 10 on hack squats or whatever, but I think you guys get what I'm saying. Is that they marry up nicely. It's slow speed strength heavy lifts that train most of the body.
Yeah, totally agree on that. Totally agree. And you spend sometimes so much time on the Olympic lifts that you then accumulate so much fatigue mentally and physically that it can then decrease your performance and decrease the volume that you can do later or in the sessions towards the end of the week. So yeah, I feel like powerlifting and bodybuilding is probably the ones that you can get benefits. You can reap the benefits from powerlifting to bodybuilding and from bodybuilding to powerlifting.
Yeah. Now, to be fair, that is the perspective of someone who had a lot of years of powerlifting and bodybuilding under their belt before doing Olympic weightlifting. So to put it in perspective, I mentioned I could squat like 220 to 225. My best snatch is 87, so how much, that means I'm a bad Olympic lifter, like relative to my strength.
Your best?
Nowadays it's 100 kilos.
That's good.
And that's only, 50 kilos more?
Good.
What's your best squat?
My best squat is 185.
See, look at the percentage there. That means you are actually a proficient Olympic weightlifter, So is that high bar or low bar?
It's low bar.
Low bar, but okay. What kind of low bar? Mark Ripeto's love there. Chris's low bar is as purest of a low bar squat as it can be. Quite nice though.
I'm putting that on my CV. Eric Helm said that for me. Thank you,
Eric.
But yeah, you're looking at like around 70% of your squat is what your snatch is. That actually typically indicates that for your strength levels, you're pretty damn good. Mine does not indicate that. So I'm not going to be very good at growing from the Olympic lifts. However, let's say I'd started when I was 21 and I first started lifting. Let's say CrossFit existed back then and I got into that and I became pretty proficient and I got the mobility to do clean and jerks and snatches early on, it might be a different story. But I think for someone who wants to get into Olympic weightlifting, all that time invested in learning the technique is an opportunity cost for growth and strengthening of the lift. So when I focus on Olympic weightlifting a lot, I do actually see some muscle groups that shrink a little bit, but mostly reflects that I'm a bad Olympic lifter.
Chris was training at some point. So the study with the powerlifters that you referred to, the one that I also presented in Finland, was done in an Olympic weightlifting hall in Athens, Greece. And in that Olympic weightlifting hall, we had a powerlifting team, which was snobbed heavily by the weightlifters. And Chris was a member of the weightlifting team, but also a really good friend of the powerlifters. How was your? How did you? So that's a question for Chris now. How was your physique back then with the elite Greek programming that you were following? The Bulgarian Greek programming of
fun fact, that training hall was the same training hall that Piros Dimas and all that golden weightlifting team were training. Yeah,
I've actually met Piros' brother, who one day came to the powerlifting section.
Let me call my lawyer first before you say that.
Okay. He walks to the powerlifting section in sandals, sits down on the bench, grabs whatever was on the bench, and one RMs it barely, and then leaves.
There was another time he took a power bar because the powerlifters were using Texas power bars, and he was trying to make them whip. It was like, what kind of bars are they? They're not whippy. I cannot whip them. There must have been very bad bars.
And you have
amazing.
And you haven't done weightlifting if somebody hasn't shouted at you during their max set to be quiet.
Yeah.
So we would get the it's time for our max sets, and we would have to stand there and wait until the max set was done. So yeah, Chris, how was your physique responding to that training?
To be honest, I was not listening to my coach back then. No offense. Like a lot, like I was doing what he was telling me, programming wise, on squats and clean and jerk and snatches. But apart from that, I was doing some extra hypertrophic work, especially for bench. For some reason, the at least Greek Olympic weightlifting coaches are very opposed to, for some reason. I think it's mostly for the shoulders. Like there might be a problem there, but I didn't see any problem of like benching just once per week and just maintaining my bench. I was also powered. I was mixing up powerlifting with Olympic weightlifting. So I lost some muscle mass on my arms because I wasn't training them directly at all. I think I was only training them once every 3 weeks or something like that. But apart from that, my legs and I think most of my back mass, I maintained it really well. But for the other muscle groups that I was not directly hitting them, yeah, I lost a bit of muscle mass, and I was still doing hypertrophy work. I don't know if that's been your experience, Eric.
Yeah, I grew when I first started Olympic weightlifting in very predictable areas, and I saw a little bit of shrinkage in other places. So like my quads got bigger, and my traps got bigger, and my back held up because I mean everything's getting pulled from the floor. And my shoulders, I don't know if my shoulders grew, but they certainly didn't shrink. So, but yeah, I did notice calves, arms, rear delts a little bit, but there's so much in Olympic weightlifting. Yeah. And you can't be in that round back kind of like position for like you do on a deadlift. So, and there's a lot of when you're pressing like behind your head, there's a lot of rear delts that are stabilizing and pulling into position too. So.
The main problem that I'm seeing, for example, nowadays, I'm training weightlifting only once, is the shoulder fatigue. It's like shoulder pain that I get from all the overhead press work that I do, and I've lost some mobility as well. So when I go in and do the Olympic weightlift, especially the jerk, it gets sometimes really painful.
Yeah, that was also my challenge. I don't have the shoulder flexion needed to be a good Olympic weightlifter, and I don't have full elbow extension either. Like that looks not bad, but it's not complete.
Yeah,
So
I've seen it. Yeah, I've seen
it
it.
should be there, you know.
I'm currently coaching an older gentleman who used to be an arm wrestler. He's around 56 years old, and from all the arm wrestling, one of his arms can only open this much. And I was wondering, like in a powerlifting competition, would he be able to tell the judges, "Look, guys, like try and pull my arm if you want. It's not gonna open. That's like his press stops here. He can't do this." Would that be a possibility? Is there some sort of rule?
Or in
Depends on the federation.
If you, Eric, inform the
depending.
judges, you cannot extend it, your arm.
Yeah, so like in Olympic weightlifting, I would often like point to my elbows and show them full extension, and that would sometimes give better likelihood of not getting red lighted on my press outs, and I mean my snatch and my clean and jerk. And for powerlifting, though, it depends on the federation. I don't think currently, technically, in the IPF, there is any provision for that. It needs to be full lockout. They're obviously not as strict as they are with Olympic weightlifting.
They're starting one in the US though. Isn't there a new USAPL ex-athlete or something like that?
I think there are some potential division changes, and I know, and like a lot of other federations are. It depends on where you're at. Like I would just encourage people to look at the federation rules.
Completely.
I've yet to see it. I mean, actually, that's not true. I've occasionally see it affect lifters who have severely limited elbow extension, where it's quite obvious. But I've never been called out on bench press for not locking out, for example. So
I think we have reached the end, the apotheosis. Just to throw a Greek word, I'm not sure if it's appropriate. I think this was a great episode for us. Aside from the show, it was nice to have you and have that chat with you. Always good to share the iron culture or some reference to your podcast. Had to do it, you know, almost mandatory at this stage. Tell Omar that we are going to be taxing him for all the Greek words used on the t-shirts.
Absolutely.
So.
Ooh, that's a lot. Rascal is gonna go under.
It actually made, because back in the day, many Greeks have the Chinese letter tattooed on their arms and back. And me looking at the t-shirts, they looked cool. But when I was reading the strength or something in Greek, I was like, I don't know whether I would wear that particular one in Greece. It would have been weird. The other ones
are some of them. Are some of them? Oh, not 100% right.
They're all right.
No,
but
all of them are right. Yeah.
Okay,
it's just
that'd be amazing. And then I could make fun of Omar and be like, that actually says chicken, not string.
progressive overload in Greek is a word. It sounds, I don't know. It doesn't sound that hardcore. It just sounds like a scientific term,
like a pencil neck.
Yeah. Anyways, yeah, it was an honor, man. Thank you for coming on. Yeah, thank you for being the first international guest to this new series that we're trying to launch.
My pleasure. I appreciate you guys having me on.
Opening the door for the other ones to come, aka.
Yeah, aka you again with a wig. And now we have Eric Earls here, straight from Australia, Sydney.
Make sure we change the background, not the certificates.
Yep.
Yeah.
I can just the boxes. I'll just be here. Yeah.
Nice. Really nice to have you. We also end with a flex in the show, so. It's almost mandatory. 3, 2, 1. From us, for you, for all of us.
Exactly.